Hello viewers, welcome to K Diagnostics, Dio here. Today we have a 2008 GMC ARCADIA with a 3.6 liter. The complaint on this vehicle is the check engine light remains on while the engine is running. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go inside the vehicle and confirm the customer's complaint. After confirming the complaint, we're going to connect a scan tool to the vehicle to see what kind of trouble codes we have in the engine computer. So now let's go in the vehicle and confirm the customer's complaint. Alright, so let's start the engine and confirm the customer's complaint. So right there, as you can hear, the engine is running. So I can already see that we have a couple lights on the dash. Let me zoom you guys into the dash so you can see. So here's the check engine light. So the check engine light is remaining on while the engine is running. And also the brake light just came on. The park brakes are completely released, but the brake light remains on. Okay, so check engine light is on, brake light is on, the traction control light is on, and the airbag light is on. And the tire pressure light is blinking. Okay, so customer's complaint confirmed. We got a couple lights on the dash. So in this video I'm gonna focus on the check engine light. Okay, we're gonna focus on the engine computer. Whatever codes we're gonna have in the engine computer will be the codes that are causing the check engine light to remain on. Okay, once again we have confirmed the customer's complaint. So now I'm gonna turn off the engine. I'm gonna turn the key on. I'm gonna get the scan tool connected to the vehicle. After I get the scan tool connected, I'm gonna bring you guys back up so we can scan the engine computer. Alright, so I got the scan tool connected to the vehicle. So let's see what we got here. So let's go to scanner. The scan tool has identified the vehicle 2008 GMC ACADIA with a 3.6 liter. Okay, so everything looks good. Let's click OK. Now we're gonna do a code scan. Since we have other lights on the dash besides the check engine light, I want to scan all the control units so we can see what other trouble codes we have in the other control units on this vehicle. So here are the trouble codes that we have in the engine computer. We have 5 trouble codes in the engine computer. The first one is P0171, and then P0174, P0300, P0455, and P0700. We got 5 codes in the engine computer. Let's scroll down and see what other trouble codes we have in the other control units. We have 4 codes in the transmission control unit. So first one, P0872, P0877, P0989, and U0073. Now, these trouble codes on the transmission side, these ones over here, I'm not gonna take care of them on this video. Otherwise, the video is gonna be too long. I will save this for later. I'm gonna talk to the customer about all these trouble codes that we have, and if he gives us the go-ahead to fix everything, I will probably make another video about dealing with these codes. But right now we're just gonna focus on the engine computer and the check engine light that's remaining on while the engine is running. Okay, we got 6 trouble codes in the ABS control unit. Okay, so this over here is what's causing the brake light to remain on while the engine is running. This code over here, especially this first one, this C0267 trouble code, low brake fluid indicated. So it looks like we don't have enough brake fluid in the master cylinder. So the pads, the brake pads are probably worn out, or maybe the switch, the pressure switch in the master cylinder might be defective. Okay, we got some communication codes. Lost communication with body control module, U0140. Okay, we got some more communication faults. So let's keep scrolling. We got 2 trouble codes in the airbag control unit. And on the generic side, we still have these lean codes. This P0171 and P0174, and this P0300, and then this P0700 transmission control system, and the last one U0073 control module communication bus A off. Interesting. So what do you do when you have all these trouble codes? How do you go about this? Well, let's start with the basics first. So let's go into the engine computer. Okay, let's read our codes once again. Now we are just inside the engine computer. Now, since we have 5 trouble codes in the engine computer, now we need to think about what code may cause another code to be set. I know a lean code can cause a misfire code to be set, and a misfire code can also cause a lean code, so vice versa. Now what we're gonna do is, let's focus on these 3 trouble codes first, and then this evap trouble code, we can focus about it later, okay? And then this transmission trouble code. This transmission trouble code is set because of the other codes we have inside the transmission control unit, okay? We're gonna ignore this for now. Let's focus on these 3 trouble codes first. Now, we are very familiar with these P0171 fault codes. They are lean codes. When you have a lean code set in the engine computer, the problem can be a defective mass airflow sensor, a vacuum leak, or fuel starvation, okay? We can have a low fuel pressure problem that can cause these lean codes and even misfire codes sometimes. So now what I'm gonna do is we're gonna go to our data. Actually, no, let's go back to freeze frame. I wanna look at the freeze frame data. I wanna see when these trouble codes set. So let's check out this first trouble code first. This P0174 trouble code. Let's see when this trouble code set. Freeze frame is a picture of the data that the computer takes when a trouble code is set, okay? So we're gonna look at the engine speed first. So right here, engine speed. So this trouble code set when the engine was pretty much at idle, okay? The engine speed was 723. And then let's check the temperature. Temperature was 138 degrees, so it wasn't too hot. It was in closed loop. Now let's check our fuel trim numbers. So look at our fuel trim numbers. Short-term fuel trim bank 1, 38. Wow. Long-term fuel trim bank 1, 24. And look at bank 2. Pretty much the same. So high positive numbers on our fuel trims. Long-term and short-term. Okay, so this tells me that this trouble code was set at idle and the engine wasn't at operating temperature, but it was somewhat hot. So let's back out of here. I want to check the freeze frame data of that misfire code. Let's see if that code was set at idle also. So this P0300 trouble code. Let's look at the freeze frame. Okay, so this one's set at high RPMs. Okay. And our fuel trim numbers were also high. Okay. This is like cruising. Let's see if we have the vehicle speed. Okay, so the vehicle speed is 1. So the vehicle was stationary when this trouble code set. Okay, look at our fuel trim numbers. We got high positive fuel trim numbers. And our engine temperature was 132 degrees. Okay, now let's back out. Now let's look at some data. Let's go to data display. I want to look at some misfire data first. Let's see if this is going to show us any specific cylinder that might be misfiring. So on the history over here, we got cylinder number 2 that was misfiring, cylinder 4. So it looks like these cylinders were all misfiring at some point. Okay, cylinder number 1 has got a lot of count, cylinder 3 just a little bit, and cylinder number 5 has got the most count. So now let's start the engine and see what happens. So now let's watch our live numbers over here. The engine is running right now. I'm sorry for the glare, guys. I hope you can see. So cylinder number 5 is the one that has the most count, and right now I think I saw 2 over here. The engine seems to be running fine. It's not misfiring right now, so it feels like we don't have a dead miss. We might have an intermittent miss, and this may be caused by those lean codes. Let's see if we have loop status here. Okay, no loop status available. So we got cylinder number 1 counting a little bit. Okay, we got 3. So 1 and 3 are counting. Okay, but not the other ones. Then they went down to 0. Now a little bit of count, like let's say 1 and 2, and then if a cylinder is counting a little bit and then it goes down to 0, that can be normal, okay? Because even a perfect running engine misfires slightly, okay? If you see 1 and 2 over here and then it goes down to 0, that's not a problem, okay? You don't have to worry about that. So since they're not misfiring constantly, we're gonna skip past the misfire concern right now. Okay, let's get out of this data group and let's look at some engine data. Okay, now I'm gonna focus on the lean code. I wanna focus on our fuel trim numbers and our oxygen sensor data PIDs, and possibly our mass airflow sensor data PID as well. Okay, so let's customize this list. We're gonna deselect all these PIDs. So we're gonna grab the engine speed, mass airflow sensor. So let's list this data. So we got a problem. So we are in closed loop. Look at our fuel trim numbers. Geez, short term bank 1 38%, long term 24%, so positive 38 and positive 24. So this engine is running lean, okay? The computer is sending more fuel to try to compensate for that excess air, and we don't know where that air is coming from, and we don't even know if this has a leak around the intake. It could be a vacuum leak, it could be a defective mass airflow sensor, it could be low fuel pressure, okay? So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna increase the engine RPMs and watch these fuel trim numbers. Okay, now at idle, our mass airflow sensor value is 6.90. It's going between 6.90 and 7 grams per second. So this is a pretty decent number. I don't think our problem is our mass airflow sensor. Now, another thing I have noticed, watch this. All our oxygen sensor values are showing us pretty much very low numbers. Look at this O2 sensor over here, the first O2 sensor on bank 1. We got 30, 35, it's going between 30 and 35 millivolts. O2 sensor bank 2 sensor 1, so 30 millivolts. And the ones after the catalytic converter also have low numbers. This is weird, okay? This is weird. We could have a defective O2 sensor, but I don't think all 4 O2 sensors will go bad at the same time, okay? These O2 sensors are reading very, very lean right now, okay? Look at that. Something is not right. Check this out. 35 millivolts here, 15 millivolts here. The O2 sensors before the catalytic converters on both banks, I mean either bank 1 or bank 2, they should be fluctuating between 900 millivolts and 200 millivolts, okay? They should be going between lean and rich. They should be switching between lean and rich as the engine is running. And the ones after the catalytic converter should have a pretty straight line, okay? A pretty steady line of about 700 millivolts or 600 millivolts. So now with that being said, let's focus on our fuel trim numbers first, okay? Our fuel trim numbers are high. We're gonna focus on the fuel trim numbers while we're watching these O2 sensor graphs also. Now I'm gonna increase the engine RPMs. Let's watch these numbers to see if these numbers will get better. After increasing the engine RPMs, if these fuel trim numbers get better, that will tell me that we most likely have a vacuum leak around the intake manifold. Oh, check that out. So our RPM right now is 3000 RPMs, and watch our fuel trim numbers, okay? And on a good working engine, our numbers should be plus or minus 10% total fuel trims, okay? Short term plus long term. And look at our graphs over here. Our graphs got better. You see, this is what we're supposed to see on a good working O2 sensor. So since our graphs over here, our values got better, this here tells me that our O2 sensors are working fine. We most likely have a huge vacuum leak somewhere, okay? So these are the O2 sensors after the catalytic converter. You see how we have a steady voltage now? We now have a steady voltage of about 700 millivolts. Okay, we got 6, okay, so 625 volts, millivolts on this one over here. So we have a good switching O2 sensor over here, so they're both switching. Now let's look at our fuel trim numbers. So right now on bank 1, our total trim is about 0, okay? And look at bank 2, our total trim on bank 2, so -3, okay? So we remove this 3 over here out of the 5 on the long term, so we have about 2% on the second bank, on bank 2. So our fuel trim numbers are getting better at high RPMs. So now I'm gonna let off the accelerator pedal. Watch this. I let off the accelerator pedal. Our long-term numbers are climbing up. Our short-term numbers are climbing up as well. And oh, look at these O2 sensors over here. Our O2 sensors went down. Look at this first O2 sensor over here on bank 2. It went down to 25 millivolts. And this one over here went down to 15 millivolts. Okay, so we have, this is a classic symptom of a vacuum leak. We have a vacuum leak. We have unmirrored air that's entering the engine, okay? Unmirrored air is entering inside the intake manifold, and the computer is trying to compensate for that excess air. So it's opening the injector a lot longer to compensate for that. That's why we have, you know, high positive numbers over here at idle. So yeah, we definitely have a vacuum leak. Look at this. our O2 sensors are like bottomed flat right now. Okay, so now let me increase the engine RPMs again. So you see, when I increase the engine RPMs, our O2 sensors start switching, and the ones after the catalytic converter start working again. Okay, and our fuel trim numbers, I'm sure, got better. Look at that. Okay, when I let off the accelerator pedal, our fuel trim numbers get worse. Okay, so we have a vacuum leak, guys. So now let's go under the hood and do a visual inspection. If we can't see anything obvious, we're gonna use a smoke machine to send smoke in the intake to see where our vacuum leak is. Like, based on the numbers we have here and this data, we definitely have a vacuum leak, no questions about it. So now let's go under the hood. So we're gonna pry this up. All right, let's see what we got here. I'm gonna do a quick visual inspection here. So everything seems pretty fine. I'm gonna bring you here under the hood so we can take a closer look of the intake manifold. We got the engine cover removed. I'm looking around the intake manifold. I don't see anything that's catching my eye. Everything looks pretty fine. So now what I want to do is I'm gonna bring out our smoke machine. We're gonna disconnect this inlet tube. We're gonna send smoke into the intake manifold and see if smoke will come out of somewhere here around the intake manifold. Okay, so I'm gonna get my smoke machine set up, and then I'll bring you guys back up so we can send smoke inside the intake. All right, so now let's send some smoke into the intake manifold. I had to remove the top part of the air filter box off camera. Now, one thing I noticed is, I don't know if you can see, there's a lot of oil in this tube. You probably won't be able to see, but you see that? There's a lot of oil in there, so this PCV system is probably faulty. Okay, now that's good to know. We're gonna use this easy intake bladder, okay, to block this tube over here. So now we're gonna turn on our smoke machine. I already got the air supply connected to the machine, and we got power to the machine, so we're gonna turn it on. Now let's watch. We should see smoke coming out of this line over here. We got smoke coming out of this. I hope you can see that. So now we're gonna connect this line to this line over here. Okay, so we got our smoke supply line connected to this bladder, which is gonna go through this and into the intake. So now we're gonna watch and observe. Wherever there is a leak, smoke will come out of that area. So now let's observe and see where smoke is gonna come out of. So as we are watching this, I see smoke coming out of this area. Yeah, we got a lot of smoke coming out of this area. Now the question is, where is it coming from? Oh, I don't know if you guys will be able to see, but it looks like there's a tube here. There's a tube here it's not connected. I don't know if I can put the camera in there so I can show you. So smoke is coming out of this tube over here. You see that? There's a line that goes over here. I hope you guys can see what I'm doing, guys. Okay, do you guys see that? So this tube goes into the intake, and I believe there's a tube that goes over here, but this tube is disconnected. We gotta look around and see if there's a tube that's supposed to go there. Did someone disconnect that? Or what happened? Because yeah, I mean, it's definitely leaking from this tube over here. You see that? We got smoke coming out. When I block it, see our smoke is starting to disappear. And as I'm closing this, I'm gonna show you the ball on the smoke machine. Oh, this bladder got pushed. This bladder just got pushed out. Hold on, let me zoom you guys out a little bit. So we need to figure out what connects to that tube. So the tube, there's a tube over here that's on the intake that's not connected. So basically, when I was blocking that tube, the ball on the smoke machine was actually dropping, okay, indicating that our leak was no longer present. Okay, so if I turn on the smoke machine again, let's turn that on, you'll see that smoke will start leaking out of this tube again. So I'm going to look around and see what hose or tube goes over here, okay, because I'm assuming there's a tube that's supposed to go here. Something is supposed to be connected to this tube, okay? Something should be connected here. So if I close this, so watch this, I'm gonna close this, I'm gonna show you the ball on the smoke machine. Just watch the ball start dropping. You see the ball dropping? Okay, now the ball is dropping. You see that? At this point we don't have a leak. So we don't have a leak here. So now when I let off, I'm gonna let off my finger here. Did you see that? Did you hear that? So once I let off, watch the ball again. I'm gonna let off. Did you see the ball go up? So yeah, our problem is here, guys. Okay, so I'm gonna turn off our smoke machine. So we're good there. So we can remove our bladder. Okay, so we need to figure out what line or tube goes over here. If we can find a tube that goes over here, we can get a hose and plug it and start the engine to see if our fuel trim numbers will get better. But knowing that, because this tube goes straight into the intake, so this was causing a huge vacuum leak, okay? So I'm gonna look around. I'm probably gonna remove this intake cover and look around to see if there's a tube that's disconnected. If there isn't a tube, I'm going to put a hose there and plug that tube off and see if our fuel trim numbers will get better after that, okay? I'm gonna look around to see if I can find the hose that connects to that tube back there, and then I'm gonna bring you guys back up. I looked around the back of the intake manifold to see if there's a vacuum line that goes into the tube that's open on the intake manifold. I didn't see a line back there. I even lifted up the vehicle and looked at it from under the vehicle, I didn't see anything. So I don't know if there is supposed to be a plug there that fell, because right now it's very weird. So I used my mirror in here to see if I can see something. I don't know if I can show you guys, but you guys won't be able to see because it's so freaking tight back here. But this tube over here, I hope you can see the tube on the mirror. This tube is completely open, okay? And I thought there was a line that got disconnected, but I looked around, I didn't see a line. So I don't know if there's a plug that's supposed to go here. Let's go to service info. I'm gonna pull out a picture of this intake manifold in my service information to see if we can find what goes here. Okay, if we don't find anything, we're gonna block it off with a hose, like I said earlier, and see what happens. Because I mean, I tried to look around here to see if there's a line, but I don't see anything. Okay, there's no line that I can connect. So it's this tube over here. See that tube? Okay, this is what's causing a huge vacuum leak because it's connected to the intake manifold. And I tried removing this cover, you know, but there's no need to remove this cover, okay? Because I didn't see a line under this cover, okay? And I got my hand back here. I'm trying to pull on anything. Oh, guess what, guys? Guess what? Guess what I found? Guess what I found? Look, this was laying over here. I hope you guys can see it was laying over here next to the coil. Look at this. Okay. So I believe this is a plug. Oh, look at that. It's cracked. Man, I'm glad I was able to catch this on camera. You see? So I believe this plug goes over here on this tube. Okay? Yeah. Right here. I believe this is what, oh, it fits very well on this tube over here. So this is where it goes. So over time with the heat, this plug cracked and it fell. So it fell just over here. So this is supposed to block this tube. Okay. Well, this is the problem. Okay. Right here. Okay, so this plug came off and this tube over here was open constantly. It was allowing excess air to enter the intake, which was causing our fuel trim numbers to be super high at idle. Okay, so yeah, now what we're gonna do is, since we know there's a plug that goes over here, I'm gonna find a hose. Okay, I don't have this plug over here in the shop. I'm gonna find a hose that's gonna have the same diameter, and then I can plug it off with a bolt and plug that tube over there, and then I'm gonna put everything back together. We're gonna start the engine and see if our fuel trim numbers will get better. Okay, so I'm gonna find a hose that's gonna be as big as this one. I'm gonna plug that tube, and then I'm gonna bring you guys back up so we can see if our fuel trim numbers will get better after that. I'm gonna show you what I used to plug the tube over there that's supposed to be plugged by this plug over here. Okay, so what I did was I found a vacuum hose and I plugged it with this bolt over here, and it's really tight on it. Okay, so this is not gonna go anywhere. This is pretty tight on. Okay, so this is acting as a plug, so vacuum won't be escaping from this tube. Okay, so we're good. Now we plugged that tube. I'm gonna put everything back together. I'm gonna reinstall the upper air filter box, and then we're gonna go back inside the vehicle and see if our fuel trim numbers will get better. I got everything back together, so now we're gonna go inside the vehicle and start the engine to see if this engine is not gonna be running lean anymore. Okay, so let's check out and see if the plug we put back there on the tube has fixed the lean problem. Okay, now remember the brake light was on, okay, and when we read the code in the ABS control unit, there was a code about the brake fluid being low. So when I look in here, the brake fluid is definitely low. So when I had the vehicle up, I checked the pads. The pads are completely worn out on this vehicle. I'm gonna have to let the customer know. We're gonna give him an estimate on replacing the front and the rear rotors and pads on this vehicle. We're gonna have to replace front pads and rear pads and rotors. But for now, I'm gonna add brake fluid just so the light can go off. Okay. So that should be enough. All right. Now let's go inside the vehicle. I'm gonna start the engine. So as you can hear, the engine is running. I'm gonna bring up our scan tool. So we put a little bit of brake fluid in the master cylinder. As you can see, our brake light went off. So that's good. So let's see what we got. Let's see if our fuel trim numbers got better. So check this out. Look at our fuel trim numbers. Bank 1. Short-term fuel trim bank 1 and long-term fuel trim bank 1. You see that? Our fuel trim numbers have gotten a lot better. Okay, now we're talking, and look at our O2 sensor values over here. Okay, we are not stuck low anymore. Let me graph these O2 sensors. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So this is fixed, guys. Okay, our lean code is fixed. Okay, the engine is no longer running lean. Our O2 sensors are switching very well. Okay, this is what I was talking about. Okay, so, and on the O2 sensors after the cat, we have a steady number. Okay, so around 700 millivolts on both of them. Okay, and our trim numbers are looking good. Okay, so I'm comfortable with these numbers. Okay, this is fixed. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna back out of here. Let's look at our misfire data. So nothing is misfiring. We're good to go. Okay, so let's back out. I'm gonna turn off the engine. I'm gonna turn the key back on. So this is fixed, guys. The problem was a plug that was missing on one of the intake tubes, and that was allowing excessive air to enter inside the intake manifold. Now, since we had a lot of trouble codes in the other control units, this vehicle came from an auction. What I'm gonna do is I am going to, let's do a code scan once again. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna erase all these trouble codes, because this vehicle, since the vehicle came from the auction, I'm sure it was sitting for a while. I did check the transmission fluid off camera. The transmission fluid was slightly low. I added transmission fluid, what I'm gonna do right now is I'm going to erase all these trouble codes. Okay, now erasing these trouble codes is not a big deal because the scan tool has already saved all these trouble codes. I'm gonna erase all these trouble codes and then I'm gonna test drive the vehicle. I'll test drive the vehicle around. I mean, let me show you. You see these numbers over here on the windshield? Okay, so these are some auction numbers. So I'm gonna erase all these codes, then we're gonna go for a test drive to see which trouble codes will come back. Okay, and whatever trouble code that comes back will be the ones we're gonna address. Now, remember we had a evap code on the OE side of the tool. Right now on the generic side, we only had lean codes, misfire codes, and this transmission code. But on the OE side of the tool, we had a evap code over here. Okay, this large leak code. Now, this code could have been set because the fuel cap might have been left loose, okay, or open at some point. So I'm not gonna worry about this. We know that our lean problem is fixed. Okay, our fuel trim numbers got better. Okay, so let's back out and clear all these codes. And the customer is not in a hurry to pick up this car. We can drive it around today. If the codes don't come back, we can let it idle outside the shop tomorrow, maybe for an hour or more, to see if there will be any codes that will come back. Right now we erased all the codes, so now let's scan this again. Let's see what codes is gonna come back. Okay, so the airbag code is a hard code, so it came back up. No codes on the engine or the transmission, and no codes on the ABS. All right, so the scan tool is done scanning all these control units. Okay, so we only have a couple codes now. Okay, this code is for the airbag. Okay, so only that airbag code came back. Let's back out of here. I'm gonna start the engine. Let's check out our fuel trim numbers once again before we go on a test drive. Okay, check out our fuel trim numbers right here. Okay, we're good. Our O2 sensors are switching well. Okay, same thing on both sides. So we're good. So now let's take this for a test drive and see what happens. As you can see now, the check engine light is no longer remaining on because we erased the trouble codes, but the airbag light is on. Now I will talk to the customer. If he wants us to fix the code for the airbag, I'll probably make a different video for that. But for now, we fixed the huge vacuum leak on the intake that was causing the lean codes to be set and the misfire codes to be set as well. And I'm pretty sure that can also cause these transmission codes to be set, because if the engine is misfiring severely, it may cause the transmission to set some trouble codes. And knowing that the transmission fluid was slightly low, so let's see. Let's go on a test drive and see if the check engine light will come back on. If the check engine light doesn't come back after the test drive, we're gonna wrap up this video. I still have our scan tool connected to the vehicle. So now let's test drive around the shop and see if the check engine light is gonna come back. The vehicle drives well, the transmission shifts well, so everything seems pretty fine right now. So I can say for sure that we have fixed one of the problems that this vehicle had. I mean, the lean problem is fixed for sure. I can say that for sure. So let's drive back to the shop. Once we get to the shop, we're gonna wrap up this video, okay? So I'm gonna drive back to the shop. I'm gonna turn off the camera. I will bring you guys back up once I get to the shop so we can wrap up this video. Alright guys, we are back at the shop. I'm gonna bring up our scan tool so I can show you the fuel trim numbers one last time before we wrap up this video. So let's see what we got. So look at our O2 sensor graphs. So everything looks good. Let's scroll down and look at the fuel trim numbers. So our numbers on bank 1 look good, and the numbers on bank 2 look good as well. So the lean code is fixed. Okay, let's back out and try to read the codes and see if there's any trouble codes that came back. Let's go to codes menu, display codes. As you can see, no codes present. Okay, so this is fixed, guys. So now I'm gonna get the scan tool out of the way. I'm gonna turn off the engine. All right guys, so I'm gonna leave this right over here. We have fixed the lean problem. We're gonna give the vehicle back to the customer after we fix the brakes. We're gonna have him take it to the inspection guy. Hopefully it's gonna pass inspection, and hopefully these transmission codes don't come back. But if they do come back, we will address them at that point. But for now, we're good, okay? I'm not gonna worry about those transmission codes because the fluid was low and this had been sitting at an auction, okay? So I'm gonna leave this right over here. I hope you liked the video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. Thanks for watching. See you next time.